Hi, I'm Brickroad. Welcome to my cube collection video. I wish I could be shooting it on something other than a 5-year-old cell phone camera, but a man goes to war with the tools he has. So here's the story is, last summer my wife and I bought a house, and we were buying a bunch of stuff on Amazon for the house, and Amazon was like, hey man, why don't you also buy a Rubik's Cube? Like, it popped up in the little Amazon recommendations area. And I haven't owned a Rubik's Cube since I was a kid, and I thought it would be a fun thing to have. I'm kind of a fidgeter when I'm at my desk. I like to have something in my hands just to play with, and usually it's my wife's hair clips, and then I break them and she gets mad. So I was like, I'll buy a Rubik's Cube, and I'll learn to solve one, and I'll have something to play with in my hands. So this is the cube that I bought last summer, and this is a Rubik's Cube 2.0, and the difference between this one and Rubik's Cubes that I remember from being a kid is instead of stickers, it has little plastic tiles set into each little cubie, and it feels really nice. It's a very high quality cube to look at and to feel in your hands. I like the feel of the plastic. But what I did is I looked online and I started watching videos of people in like the cubing community, because there is a cubing community, and the Rubik's brand cubes tend to be viewed as low quality cubes, and I was not really sure why. So we're going to get into that, but first, just some basic cubing terminology for those of you who don't know. They're always called cubes, even the ones that aren't cubes, as we'll see. This one is called a 3x3 cube because it's 3 pieces by 3 pieces by 3 pieces. Technically, I guess it should be called a 3x3x3, but just the shorthand, they call it the 3x3. By contrast, this is the Rubik's 2.0 2x2 cube. It only has 2x2x2. This one, of course, the big difference is this cube has centers and edges and corner pieces, whereas this one only has the 4 corner pieces. Both of these are cool puzzles, and I think this kind of forms the basis of any cubing collection. When I decided to expand my own cubing collection, I found on Amazon they were selling them in groups like this. And these cubes, these are not Rubik's Cubes. These are made by a company called Shengshao. And we see here I've got the 2x2, the 3x3, the 4x4, and the 5x5 puzzle. These are all just standard cubes, and what I immediately noticed is that those videos I had watched that talked about the Rubik's Cube being low quality immediately became apparent. Just how much nicer the cube turns in my hand. It's not as clicky or as loud. The only thing I think the Rubik's Cube has over these puzzles is that it has the little tiles instead of the stickers. So I got these 4 cubes, I learned to solve them all, and I really like them over the Rubik's brand. So I don't have a Rubik's brand 4 or 5, just the 2 and 3. And so these became the core of my collection, and I was like, well, let's see what other things I can get that aren't just like a grid of cubes. What else is out there? So here we have the Dino Cube, and the difference between the Dino Cube and the standard 3x3 is the 3x3 could call an edge turner. You turn the edge of the cube here to make moves, whereas the Dino Cube is a corner turner. You only turn the corners to make moves. Like so. And this is actually a very easy puzzle, but it was a good one for me to get early in my collection because you can't really translate anything you know about turning this puzzle to solving this one. This one is a totally different beast. So I do enjoy the Dino Cube. I think there are higher quality ones out there than the one that I have, but I'm kind of accustomed to it now. And I wanted to see if there were more out there like the Dino Cube that turned on the corner but could be a little more complicated. And that's how I ended up getting the Skewb, and I guess they call it the Skewb because it's a skewed cube. So again, this is a corner turning puzzle, whereas the Dino Cube kind of turns on the outside corner. The Skewb turns on the inside corner. And this puzzle, I believe, is called a deeper than origin puzzle because the cut here that the corners turn on goes deeper than the actual center of the puzzle itself, which means every turn you make changes all 6 faces of the puzzle. And so this was a much more complicated puzzle to learn how to solve. But I did learn how to solve it, and now that I know how to solve it, it's a pretty simple one. But still, the Skewb, pretty neat. It was also about now that I started realizing how similar some of these puzzles could be. For example, I ordered this one. This is called the Mirror Blocks, and this is one of my favorite puzzles, but what I didn't know about it when I ordered it is it's just a standard 3x3. The difference is, instead of colors on the cube, you're matching up the shapes of each side. Each side, the cut is in a slightly different spot, either the horizontal or vertical cuts, which means when you turn it, it totally changes the shape of the puzzle, like this. So when it's fully scrambled, it doesn't even resemble a cube. In fact, this is a really fun one to pull out when company comes over, because when it's fully scrambled, you can't even tell, really, that it's supposed to be a cube shape. So solving it was a fun exercise, but it's just a standard 3x3. All the same moves and everything do work on it. And the same is true for this puzzle here. This is called the Void Cube, and this is an official Rubik's product, and you can see right away what the gimmick to the Void Cube is. Whereas the standard 3x3 has centers and edges and corners, this one only has edges and corners, so you can see right through the middle of it. And this puzzle isn't more complicated to solve than a standard 3x3, but there's one or two things about it that can get you in trouble because the centers need to be lined up properly, and if you don't have them lined up properly, the rest of the cube won't fall into place. I really don't like this cube though, because all the turning mechanisms have to be around the edges or in the corners, it doesn't feel nice to turn. It's really crunchy and it's not very smooth. So I play with this one less often than the rest. Still, it's kind of a neat thing for the collection, and again, it kind of blows people's mind if you show it to them for the first time. Another one that I have that's just kind of a standard 3x3 is this. This is called the Fisher Twist, and it's what's called a Fisher Cube because you can see, if you look just at the top of the cube, it's still broken up into 9 blocks, it's just offset a little bit. So what would be the corners on a Rubik's Cube are actually the edges, and what are the edges are actually the corners. What they've also done with this puzzle, though, is turned it 90 degrees so you get this kind of skewed, rotated property. So you've got these like pointy edges, and when this one's scrambled up, again, it looks really bizarre. It doesn't even look like it should take a cube shape. So just like this, you can see everything's pointing everywhere and you get really confused. But if you know how to solve the 3x3, you can conquer this one pretty easily. It requires all the same moves, so it's not more complicated to solve, it's just more fun to look at, really. You also have what are called cuboids. These are puzzles that aren't really cubes, they're kind of rectangular in features. This is a 2x2x3 cuboid. And this is a really interesting puzzle. Very simple to solve, but cuboids present challenges that standard cubes don't. And this was my first kind of look into that world. The thing about this cuboid in particular is that if you can make standard turns on this face 90 degrees at a time, but this face along the vertical slice you can only do 180 degrees. It's got to be a full turn. On a Rubik's Cube that would be considered like a double turn, but on this cube that's what the full turn is. So it presented some interesting challenges and wasn't solved exactly the same way as the standard cubes I was used to. This is another cuboid that I have. This is the 1x3x3, and this is sometimes called the floppy cube because the mechanism needed to make it turn like this. Any cube you have that turns so a corner is kind of sitting off the top should by rights fall apart, but if you look carefully you can see how it's connected to the center of the puzzle. So there's a couple ways you can actually make this work. And one way they do it is to make the centerpiece floppy around the edges. So when you turn like this, the center of the puzzle actually bends upward to accommodate the piece. This isn't literally a floppy cube because they just have the mechanism kind of dug out slightly right here along the edges. So this centerpiece and the 4 edge pieces connected to it aren't literally straight. There's a little circular bit in there so it can turn. But this is an interesting cube because you can shapeshift with it. You can do this and make it not a cube anymore. That said, it's still a pretty trivial cube to solve. This is one of the few cubes I have that my wife can solve just fine. But it is another cuboid, and I like to get more complicated versions of stuff like this. So that's what I did. This one is the 3x3x9 cuboid, and this one actually has 9 individual layers that turn when you scramble the puzzle. And the interesting thing about this cuboid is that it's not proportional. Obviously, if you were to make a proportional cube, it would be 3 times longer. So each of these little sides could be a cube in and of itself. So instead of shape-shifting, this one actually locks. When you turn it to the side like this, now I can no longer make these turns because it's being blocked or bandaged by these other pieces. So this one actually is tricky to scramble. You have to actually scramble all the layers like this, and then do a 180 degree turn like this, and then scramble the layers again. That way the layers can get scrambled in and amongst themselves. And then after you're done with those kind of moves, you can scramble it like a regular 3x3 cube. And this one took me a long time to figure out. This was a very tricky puzzle to solve, but it is one of my favorite cubes now, and I want to keep collecting cuboids. Oh, jump cut, because 5-year-old cell phone camera is bad. I want to keep collecting cuboids, not necessarily unproportional ones like this, because certain kinds of cuboids will actually completely change shape, like the floppy cube that I showed you, but I want to get bigger versions of that aren't trivial to solve. So one interesting property of cubes, and yes, this still is called a cube even though it's not at all a cube, but one interesting property is that just by changing the shape of the pieces, you can really change the puzzle a lot, if only psychologically. For example, this one here is called the Ivy Cube, and I really just like the way this cube, how smoothly it turns, and how lovely it looks. Like, I've mostly purchased this cube. I knew it was going to be a very simple puzzle to solve, but I mostly purchased it just because it looks really nice on display. But apparently I've read that it has the same internal mechanism as this, which is called the Pyraminx. This is a pyramid cube with triangular faces, and it turns like this. And it's very clicky and kind of big, and it's got these top pieces here which are just trivial to solve. I mean, you just turn those into place. But apparently, I've read that these two puzzles have the same internal mechanism. They're the same puzzle, just with different shapes. But the way that I solve them is so completely different. I can't wrap my head around solving the Ivy Cube like the Pyraminx, or vice versa. So you run into cool situations like that, where just small change in the shapes of the cube can make an entirely new puzzle. Nobody would look at these two things and think, oh, that's the same puzzle. And we'll see that again on this puzzle here. This is a 2x2 dodecahedron, and this is another one that you can see it moves really smoothly. I actually like this puzzle a lot, but this is identical to a puzzle that I've already showed you, and I'm not sure if you can guess which one. If you think you can, go ahead and leave your answer in the comments, and then at the end of the video we'll find out if you were right. So the reason that I got that 2x2 dodecahedron is that I have a couple of other dodecahedron puzzles which I really, really like. And this is another situation where just changing the shape of the pieces can change the puzzle significantly. This is called the Megaminx, and this is called a 2x2 Megaminx. And I guess they call it that because it's 2 pieces to a side, where the standard Megaminx has 3 pieces to a side. The puzzle turns like this. It's an edge-turning puzzle. The difference is it has 5 faces per side instead of 4 faces per side, so you have these pentagonal faces. So it's a much more complicated puzzle than a Rubik's Cube, although most of the Rubik's Cube moves are needed to solve this. And then this puzzle is just it's a simpler version. Basically, you don't have to worry about the little edge pieces. But if you look very carefully, inside the center of the puzzle, you can see it has all the same pieces as this one. It has the same turning mechanism. Instead of this large centerpiece with a sticker on it, it has a very small circular centerpiece. And then instead of having the little edge pieces that form the star, those pieces are inside the puzzle, kept internally here. So the inner mechanism of these puzzles is identical, and it's just the shape of the pieces on the outside of the core that has changed significantly. Otherwise, these are pretty much the same puzzle, just this is a slightly simpler version of this one, and these are 2 of my favorites. Not every puzzle I have is a favorite. For example, this is the 2-layer cheese. It's I mean, you call it a cube, even though it's like a little tiny, like a disc or a cylinder. And this puzzle, I don't know if the puzzle itself is not a great design, or if this is just like a cheap version of it, but you can kind of see why I wouldn't like this puzzle. It's that the pieces don't want to stay together. These center turns happen so easily and so smoothly, but then when you want to get in here and do an edge turn, you've got to, like you're opening a jar of pickles, you really got to get in there and make sure that all the center pieces are staying lined up all the way around, and this is just a very unpleasant puzzle to play with. I have read that there are versions of this puzzle that are better made. There's one called the Rubik's UFO that is essentially the same puzzle, because I do like the puzzle itself, the algorithms you have to do to match everything up. It's just the physical construction of this puzzle that I don't enjoy. So here's another class of puzzle that I only have one of. This is called the Gear Cube, and this is just the standard Gear Cube. There's a lot of variations on this puzzle, and I thought this was going to be extremely complicated, but it's actually a pretty simple solve. But the thing about this puzzle is everything is fed together on these little gears, on these little teeth that fit together. So when you make a turn like that, just a 90-degree turn, it makes this center turn as well. So all of these pieces are kind of bound together in more interesting ways than on the standard Rubik's Cube. The ways that these pieces are bound, you see, like, all I've really done with that turn is everything still lines up. It's just now these little edge pieces have rotated like 1/3 of a turn around their axes. So this puzzle is actually very easy to solve because a lot of the pieces are bound together like that, but it moves so nicely. Like, you wouldn't expect it to move this nicely. And this is another great one to hand people that aren't familiar with cubes, because it just kind of blows their mind a little bit. Now, this is one of my newer cubes. This is the Curvy Copter, and this is another edge-turning puzzle, but you don't turn an entire face at one time. You just turn one edge at a time, kind of circularly like that, and you could do some really interesting things with this. Now, the interesting thing about scrambling this puzzle is that if you do an edge turn about 1/3 of the way through, like so, you can now turn it around like this, and the whole puzzle will start shape-shifting. Now, when you do this, the puzzle will lock very quickly. For example, now I'm not going to be able to make certain turns anymore because of, like, this over here will not move, because obviously the pieces are in the way. But it makes for a very, very interesting puzzle, and this one was a lot of fun to solve. This is another one of my favorite ones just to pick up and play with. So the last puzzle I have in collection is called the Mix-Up Cube, and this is a fantastic cube, and it's one of my favorites. And looking at it, you'll just think it's kind of it's just a 3x3 Brickroad, isn't it? It's just a little larger than a 3x3, and the pieces in the center are enlarged for some reason. Is it just a 3x3 with elephantitis? Well, this puzzle, it turns like a 3x3, but it has a gimmick to it in that you can make a half turn like this and then move the center and edge pieces and swap them. And so this puzzle gets really jumbly looking and is a lot of fun to solve. This one took me a little while, and I like this puzzle a lot, but everybody I've handed it to scramble it for me says the same thing. They're like, I don't like how the pieces are different sizes across. And then I have to show them that jumbling move, and they go, oh, that's weird. So this is one of my favorite puzzles that I have in the collection. I solve this one a few times a week, and there are more complicated versions of it out there that I'll probably get eventually. So that's where my cube collection stands after 6 or 7 months of collecting. I know this is not the typical type of video that I put up on this channel, and I hope you were able to enjoy it anyway. And if you're a cuber that happened upon this video on my channel, I hope you stick around and watch some of my other stuff. Now I'm going to reveal which puzzle I have that this dodecahedron is identical to, and it's actually just the standard 2x2x2 puzzle. There's 4 corners up on top, and 4 corners on the bottom, and there it is. Same puzzle. I didn't figure that out right away.